In Shadows of the Moon, A Werewolf's Redemption, Alex, a young werewolf with a death-defying spirit, finds himself entangled in a world divided by prejudice and fear. After rescuing Cleo from a grizzly bear attack, Alex is confronted with the depth of his own courage and the potential cost of his selfless acts. His conversation with Cleo hints at a destiny that beckons him towards greatness, a path fraught with danger, but also the promise of becoming the best among his kind. When a human Tanner arrives at the Werewolf Academy seeking Alex's help to rescue a kidnapped loved one, it sets off a chain of events that forces Alex to confront not only external threats but also his inner demons. The school's heightened security, a response to past tragedies, is breached for Tanner, suggesting a dire situation that requires Alex's unique skills. Alex's journey takes him through harrowing rescues of werewolves from human extremists, revealing a dark underbelly of experimentation and torture. These experiences weigh heavily on him, yet they are balanced by moments of profound connection and love, especially with Ciale, who sees beyond his heroics to the vulnerable person beneath. An interview with a reporter, Lizzie, becomes a platform for Alex to share these grim realities, humanizing werewolves in the public eye and challenging prevailing stereotypes. Despite the personal sacrifices and the loss of Cleo, which haunts him deeply, Alex remains steadfast in his mission to bridge the gap between humans and werewolves. As the narrative unfolds, Alex must confront his greatest adversary, Drogon, whose actions threaten to escalate the conflict between species. With Jace, the Academy's dean who regards Alex as a son, refusing to lose another loved one to extremism, a final confrontation looms. Alex's determination to end Drogon's reign of terror reflects his unwavering commitment to protect both humans and werewolves. The novel culminates in a poignant blend of tragedy and resilience, as Alex attends Cleo's funeral, grappling with guilt and grief but also finding solace in Ciale's understanding embrace. It's a story that explores the complexities of identity, sacrifice, and the power of empathy to transcend boundaries. Shadows of the Moon is ultimately a tale of redemption, where amidst the struggle for coexistence, one werewolf's journey illuminates the path to unity and the potential for change. Chapter 1. Alex closed his eyes. Ciale sat on the couch with his head pillowed in her lap. She ran her fingers softly through his hair as his thoughts drifted. He saw Cleo sitting in his room. He had just rescued her from the angry bear, and she was having trouble coming to terms with what had just happened. You realize that was a grizzly bear, right? I knew it was a grizzly, Alex answered quietly. Why would you do that? It wasn't an accusation. It was said with wonder. Why would anyone? Cassie calls it my death wish, Alex admitted. I've seen you talking to Jet's statue, she said. He nodded, his eyes shut tight. You know he is a part of you. He's a part of what pushes you so hard because of what you can become. What can I become? Alex asked. The best of us, Cleo replied. Familiar footsteps caught Alex's ears, chasing away the memory. He turned his head slightly. A door opened and closed. Another opened and closed again. The door to Pat Cleo's quarters finally burst open. Alex looked up to see Trent standing wide-eyed in the doorway. Alex, I've been looking everywhere for you, Trent exclaimed. Alex sat up. Why? What's wrong? Trent waved his arm toward the front of the school. There's someone at the gate asking for you. Trent sucked in a breath. And he's human. Alex and Ciale ran down the stairs behind the small werewolf. A crowd of students near the doors parted to let them through. They found Professor Kanan guarding the exit. Let him out, Kanan instructed Professors Chet and Vance, who stood in front of the doors to the courtyard. Alex hurried through with Ciale close behind. Trent ran at his other side. The werewolf's eyes were wide as he spoke. Doesn't he know it's a death sentence coming here? He's lucky Brock is the one who saw him on the screen. Mouse has been increasing the school's security since the general's death. How did he get through without being stopped? Alex asked. Jace was the one who answered when they reached the gate. I told Brock to let him through. I figured he was here for a reason. Alex found Tanner on the other side of the iron bars. The boy's eyes filled with relief at the sight of Alex. They took her, Alex. I need you to get her back. You've got to help her. Who? Alex asked, alarmed at the panic in Tanner's voice. The 17-year-old short blonde hair was disheveled and leaves clung to his blue coat. Sarah, Tanner said. His eyes filled with tears. She didn't come home and they've been taking people. I know they have her. She's got to be so scared. The tremor in his voice said he feared much worse. I tried to file a missing person's report, and the police are doing everything they can, but it's not enough if she's in the SAA. Her parents are beside themselves. His gaze was pleading. You've got to help me. Alex met Jay's gaze. I need to go. Do you want help? The dean asked. Alex shook his head. I've got it. Jay's nodded. Be careful. Keep in contact and let us know if you need anything. I will, Alex promised. Ciale followed him around the academy to the secondary storage room. Trent already had the motorcycle running. He held out the helmet. I figured you'd need this. You approve me going to Grayton? Alex asked, amazed. Trent gave a long-suffering sigh. It's not like you'd listen to me if I said no. At Alex's look, he nodded. Yeah, I approve. He really seems to need you. Thanks, Alex told him. Alex was fully aware that Ciale hadn't said a word. She had returned early from the holiday break with her father to be with him while he coped with Kalia's death. Now he was leaving. Alex met her gray gaze. I'll be here when you get back, she said before he could speak. Alex didn't know what to say. Cassie would have scolded him, Kalia would have told him not to be stupid, but Ciale just supported his decision. He leaned down and pressed his lips against hers. The warmth of her touch flooded through him, filling him with strength. I'll go to check on that stuck gear shift on the lawnmower, Trent said, turning away from them to noisily fiddle with something in the corner. Ciale's lips curved into a smile and she stepped back. I think you just made your best friend uncomfortable. You did, Trent replied with his back still turned. Alex grinned. I'll apologize to him when I get back. He climbed onto the motorcycle. You could apologize to me now. I'm standing right here, Trent pointed out. Be careful, Ciale said to Alex. I'll try. It's like I'm not even here, Trent muttered. See what happens if he needs me and I just ignore him. You'll answer, Alex said. Trent gave in. Yeah, I'll answer. But you take me for granted. I'll work on that, promise, Alex said, shifting the motorcycle into gear. He sped through the storage room and around the side of the academy. He felt the stares of the students at the doors as he drove through the courtyard to the gate Jay's had opened. He stopped near Tanner's black car. Let's go. As Alex followed Tanner's car on the return trip to Grayton, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was more running away from the reminders of Kalia that filled the academy than rushing to help save Sarah. The relief he felt at leaving the school behind was unmistakable. The thought of going back to the academy made his chest ache. He lowered his head and concentrated on Tanner's rear lights in an effort to leave the thoughts he wasn't ready to deal with behind. That whole school is filled with werewolves? Tanner asked when they stopped at his apartment near sunrise. Alex climbed off the motorcycle and hung his helmet on the foot peg. Yeah. He looked at Tanner. How did you know where to find it? Tanner looked worried as though he had crossed a line. You mentioned Haroldsburg the first time we met you. When I looked it up, I couldn't find any mention of a school around there, but then I found a football schedule for a preparatory academy. It listed the address. He rubbed the back of his neck. I hope that's okay. Alex made a mental note to mention to Jays about the security risk. He wouldn't have been surprised if Mouse and Brock had already made the connection at Tanner's appearance. Don't worry about it. How do I find the guys who took Sarah? This way, Tanner said. He led Alex across the street to the apartment building he had escorted Sarah to the night they had eaten dinner at. Cherish. I had to stay after school to make up a test and I was supposed to meet her here afterwards, but when I got here she was gone and this was left. Alex studied the graffiti Tanner pointed to. The red dagger with a black circle around it had been spray painted next to the door that led into the apartment complex. Do you know what gang it is? Tanner shook his head. There's so many of them now. What will they do with Sarah? I don't know, he replied, his voice tight. Over the last several weeks, people have gone missing and nobody comes back. Alex headed to his motorcycle. Where are you going? Tanner called. To the SAA. I'm going with you, Tanner insisted. Alex turned. You can't. It wouldn't be safe and I would have to worry about protecting you instead of focusing everything on getting Sarah and the others out of there. The others? Tanner repeated. Alex nodded. You said others had been taken. I'm not going to leave them to the whims of some ruthless gang. Tanner stepped back, his face pale. Alex shoved his helmet on his head and started the engine. He drove to Angel Street, remembering Cherish's description of the SAA, the streets south of Angel Street where the city was made up of slums. He sped through the business section of town. Even at the early hour, cars lined the roads and people were hurrying into skyscrapers. Alex wondered what they did on the highest floors and what the view looked like from so high. As soon as he passed the last huge building, the difference was palpable. Apartment buildings, a few empty, dilapidated skyscrapers left to corrode, and storefronts with bars across their windows lined the road. The smell made the hair on the back of Alex's neck stand up. The sweet odor of rotting garbage combined with the scent of unwashed bodies and fear hung over the SAA like a putrid canopy. Gang signs had been tagged on every building and street sign. The street lights flickered and blinked spasmodically. The skyscrapers he passed that had once been towering giants were filled with broken windows and gutted interiors as though the SAA had swallowed them back into its miserable remains. Nobody walked the streets. Gray, hazy pre-dawn light filtered down to the dirty sidewalks. A dog barked at him from an alleyway, then ducked behind a garbage can when he drew near on his motorcycle. Alex studied the graffiti he passed. After 4 more blocks, the red dagger with a black circle around it began to appear. Alex turned left, then right following the symbols. He slowed at the sight of a decrepit building with a huge red knife spray-painted across the front. When Alex pulled his motorcycle to the curb across the street, 3 men came out eyeing him down. Alex's heartbeat began to race as he crossed to them. He willed his nerves to relax, knowing that if he lost control it would be much harder to find Sarah. "What do you want?" a burly man with a scar down his cheek asked. "I need to find someone," Alex replied. The man's lips cracked into a humorless smile. "There's no one here. You better get lost if you know what's good for you," the tall, skinny man to his right said. Alex let out a slow breath as he weighed his options. He could take them out and force his way in, but he didn't know how many people were inside the building, and if they started shooting, someone innocent could get hurt. He could try to find another way in that wasn't being guarded, but that would take precious minutes he wasn't sure Sarah had. He went with option 3. Before any of the men could move, Alex punched the skinny man in the stomach, followed by a haymaker to his jaw that knocked the man to the ground. He blocked a punch from the burly man and ducked under the swipe of a knife the man on the left pulled out. Grabbing the man's knife hand, Alex slammed a fist into his throat and a knee into his groin. He caught the knife as the man fell. The burly man swung for his head. Alex ducked and landed a right to the man's chest, followed by an elbow to the man's jaw. He staggered backwards. Anger burned in the man's eyes when he looked back at Alex. The man swung with both fists. Alex caught his wrist with an elbow, ducked under the man's arm and brought it up behind his back. A heartbeat later, the knife was at the man's throat, pressing hard enough that Alex could feel each ragged breath. "I need to find someone," Alex growled in his ear. "And you're going to show me where she is." "Okay," the man gasped. Chapter 2. Alex kept the blade firmly pressed to the man's throat as they entered the building. Scents of many people, stale food, dusty furniture, and dirty carpets touched his nose. It appeared to have been an office building once. The front doors led to a wide corridor that looked like it had seen far better days. Men and women of all ages stared at Alex as he forced his captive past them. He kept the man close, the blade at his neck visible to anyone who might want to make a move to stop them. "Dag, what are you?" A man with metal studs through his cheeks stopped talking at the sight of the knife. "This kid's looking for someone," Dag said, his voice tight. The man took a step toward them. "Stay right there," Alex growled in a tone that left no room for argument. The man with the studs held up a hand. "Okay, take it easy. Who are you looking for?" "Someone your gang took." The man's eyes narrowed. He glanced behind him. "Other members of the gang." "Press forward." Alex turned slightly so that his back was protected by a pillar. "Take me to the people you kidnapped," Alex demanded. The sound of quiet footsteps behind him alerted him of the danger. "We'll take you," Studs said. "Just let Dag go and we can." His eyes flicked behind Alex. Alex ducked and spun, throwing Dag away from him. A chain slammed into the pillar where he had stood. Alex attacked the man, barreling him into the ground with the force of a bull. Alex rolled back his feet as the gang closed in. Alex blocked a punch with his forearms and drove a fist into a man's groin. He slammed an elbow against a nose and followed it with a left haymaker to the next attacker's jaw. Alex dodged to the right and caught the arm of the man, who threw the punch. Spinning to the inside, Alex used his momentum to throw the man into several others, knocking them to the floor. Someone grabbed Alex from behind in a bear hug. He bent his knees and threw an elbow back, catching the man in the stomach. He slammed a fist to the man's groin, caught his wrist with his free hand, and stepped around behind the man's leg. He threw the man forward into two women with bats. "Who is this guy?" Stutz demanded, holding his jaw. "I'm something you've never seen," Alex replied. He allowed the anger that had been building within him to surface. Blue colored the edges of his vision. His fingers lengthened, his muscles bulged, and his limbs elongated. The crowd fell back from him in terror. Alex grabbed Dag by the front of the shirt. "Take me to the girl," he said in a deep half-growl, half-yell that echoed through the building. Dag's face paled and he nodded quickly. "To that way," he stuttered. Alex dragged him in the direction the man pointed. The crowd fell away on either side of them. The scent of their fear tainted the room. Alex followed Dag through a set of doors to a stairway. They walked quickly down. A chill permeated the unheated air. Alex fought back the strange impulse to shiver. A voice spoke before they reached the bottom. "Go back up," a man said in a bored voice, as though he often told gang members they weren't allowed to enter the basement room. "He's got a gun," Dag said to Alex. "And trust me, he won't hesitate to use it." Alex's hand tightened and the man winced at the pressure of his claws. "Do I look afraid?" he asked in a growl. The man sat in a chair next to the only door. As soon as Dag and Alex came into sight, he jumped up, his eyes wide. He lifted his gun. "You can shoot me," Alex told him, "but it will only make me mad. Drop your gun and I won't snap both of your necks." The man's gaze shifted from Alex to Dag. Dag nodded quickly. The gun fell out of the man's hand. "Open the door," Alex commanded. The man fumbled in his pocket. He pulled out a key, then dropped it on the floor. He glanced back at Alex's approach. His face paled and his hands shook. Alex heard the click of the lock springing free. He pulled the door open and shoved both men inside with him. "Where are they?" he demanded. Who?" the man with the key asked. "He wants the girls," Dag replied. "Give him the girls." Doors lined the hallway. Alex could hear whimpers from several of them. "Give me everyone you have down here." "But Tayden will kill me," the man protested. Alex grabbed him by the front of the shirt and lifted him high enough that his feet no longer touched the ground. "What do you think I'll do if you refuse?" The man nodded quickly. "Okay, I'll do it." Alex dropped him. He scrambled back to his feet and pulled out another set of keys. One by one he unlocked the doors. Alex stepped into the first room. A girl not much older than his 17 years cowered in the corner. She hadn't even looked up to see him, but she was crying. His chest tightened at the thought that whatever they did to the girls was enough to make her huddle in the corner of the sparse room. The scent of fear wafted heavily from her. "I'm getting you out of here." The girl glanced up at the sound of Alex's voice. Her eyes widened. She looked like she didn't know whether to scream or run. "I'm not going to hurt you," Alex promised. "I want to help you get home." Something in her eyes flickered at the word home. Alex crouched slowly, careful to keep his distance. "I know I look scary," he said. He let out a breath, hoping somehow she would realize she could trust him. "I'm not like them," he continued, gestured toward the building above. "My friend Sarah is here. I've come to rescue her and see all of you safely home." The girl blinked in the dim light. Alex could see bruises on her face. Her wrists looked raw, as though she had recently been tied up. He couldn't blame her for not trusting him after all she had been through. He didn't know how he would get the girls home if he couldn't even convince them to follow him out of the building. Morphing was one complication he hadn't foreseen. I know Sarah." Alex turned back around, careful to keep his motions slow. "You do?" She nodded, her eyes wide as they searched his face. Her gaze lingered on his eyes. After a moment, she rose from her corner and walked to him. She stopped several feet away. It wasn't all-out trust, but it was better than having to carry them out one at a time. "What's your name?" Alex asked as gently as he could. Amber, she replied, her voice timid. Amber, I'm Alex. Will you help me get the other girls out of here? Relief filled him when Amber nodded again. He stepped back so she could pass. Through the door. Dag took a step forward as though to force Amber back into her room. When the girl shrank away from him, rage erupted in Alex's chest. You will never hurt these girls again, he snarled. He swung a backhand and caught the side of Dag's head so hard the gang member spun completely around before he collapsed, unconscious to the ground. Instead of fearing him more after his outburst, seeing her captor knocked out seemed to give Amber strength. She hurried into the next room. A moment later, another girl came out. She shrieked at the sight of Alex, but Amber caught her arm. It's okay. He's a friend, she said. He's going to get us out of here. The girl eyed him uncertainly as he followed them to the next room. 7 girls huddled together in front of Alex. A familiar scent touched his nose. He looked up to see Sarah standing by the last door. One of her eyes was bruised and her wrists were red. She looked as nervous as the other girls at the open door. Sarah, Alex called. She looked up and her eyes widened. Her gaze traveled from the silver 7 on his shoulder to his eyes. Alex, is that you? Her steps forward were hesitant. Alex nodded, relieved that she recognized him. Tanner sent me. He didn't know what to do. I'm so glad you're here, she said. She surprised him by wrapping her arms around him and holding him tight. Her hands trembled. He wondered what she had been forced to endure. A small sob escaped her. Sarah took a few shuddering breaths before she stepped back. Let's get out of here, she said in a voice that was almost steady. Amber crossed into the next room. She came out again quickly. Alex, you're going to have to carry her. She's been hurt pretty bad. Alex smelled blood as soon as he entered the room. The girl on the bed was naked and had what appeared to be shallow knife wounds along her arms, her abdomen, and down one cheek. Alex could barely contain his rage at the sight of her unbound gashes. He closed his eyes, willing his heartbeat to slow so that it wouldn't start skipping. When he opened his eyes again, Amber had wrapped a sheet around the girl's body. He crouched and gathered her as gently as possible in his arms. She let out a little moan of pain and rested her head against his neck with her eyes closed. A pool of dark blood covered the bed where she had been. We need to get her to the hospital, Alex said. Let's hurry, Amber replied. I hear footsteps on the stairs, Sarah called from the hallway. Alex checked the last 2 rooms, but they were empty. He led the way back up the hallway and kicked himself mentally when he realized the gang member who had unlocked the doors was nowhere in sight. They entered the room leading to the basement and the thunder of footsteps increased. The door at the top of the stairs flew open. What's going on down there? A man who appeared to be in his 40s demanded. His hand that touched the railing gripped tighter when he got a good look at Alex. What are you? That doesn't matter, Alex replied. What matters is that I'm taking these girls out of here, and you will never bring a girl to this place again. Is that right? The man asked. Alex nodded. He could smell the terror of the girls behind him. That's Tayden, Sarah whispered. He's in charge and he's cruel. All of Alex's restraint fled at the catch in her voice. He knelt and lowered the injured girl gently to the ground. I've got her, Amber reassured him quietly, cradling the girl's head in her lap. Alex climbed the stairs in 2 leaps. Before Tayden or his men could so much as tighten their fingers on the triggers of their guns, Alex had Tayden by the throat. He lifted the gang leader to the ceiling. You think it's fun to take little girls from their homes? Alex demanded. What are they doing here? Initiation, Tayden replied, gasping against Alex's tight hold. You have your gang members kidnap girls for initiation? When Tayden nodded, Alex's stomach tightened. He asked the question he didn't want to. Then what do you do with them? Tayden's face was red and he was struggling for air too much to reply. Alex speared the man closest to them with a glare. The look of anger on his face was enough to make the man answer. Anything we want. Alex threw Tayden into his men so hard those hit were pummeled across the room like ragdolls. He crossed to the gang leader and threw him again. He slammed into a wall and fell to the ground, leaving the imprint of his body in the sheetrock. Alex bent down and grabbed the semi-conscious man by the chest. His clawed fingers dug into Tayden's skin, shocking him awake with pain. If you ever bring another girl down here, I will tear out your heart and feed it to you. Do you understand? Alex roared. Tayden nodded and Alex let him go. He fell back to the floor. No one stood in Alex's way when he and the girls left the building. Alex squinted in the bright morning sunlight. He hurried to the motorcycle and grabbed his helmet, holding it to his head the best that he could with the girl in his arms. He said, "Trent." "What, Alex? Is that you?" Trent responded groggily. "Yes, it's me. I need you to get an ambulance to." He glanced at a street sign, Chester and 5th in Grayton. "What did you do?" Trent asked, sounding suddenly wide awake. "I found Sarah and other girls the gang kidnapped. One of them needs a hospital." He looked over his shoulder. "And possibly a few of the gang members. Tell them to hurry." Alex waited impatiently until he heard the headset click and Trent said, "They're refusing to go to the SAA." "What's the SAA, Alex?" Alex searched for a lighter way to describe it and settled with, "A cesspool of humanity. Not the best place to vacation." When Trent didn't laugh, he let out a breath. "Tell them I'll protect them from the gangs." "Wait, are you in rage mode?" Trent asked, his voice near panic. "Yeah," Alex said. "I can't get it to go away, but maybe that's a good thing." "If they don't shoot you on sight," his friend replied, his voice worried. "No one's ever seen anything like you." "Then warn them what to expect," Alex replied. "Just whatever you do, get them here. These girls need to go home." "Will do," Trent replied. The sound of sirens caught Alex's ear a few minutes later. "They're on their way," he said quietly to Sarah and the others. "Thank goodness," Amber breathed. "Are you going to be okay?" Sarah asked with a hand on his arm. Alex nodded despite the foreboding in his chest. For all he knew, they would shoot him on sight regardless of the injured girl in his arms. 5 police cars slowed to a stop near Alex's motorcycle. The ambulance pulled behind them. The officers climbed out of their vehicles with their hands on their gun holsters, ready to shoot Alex if he made any threatening moves. "He saved us," Sarah said, crossing in front of Alex and shielding him from them. "He's okay." "What about the girl?" an officer called. "She's hurt," Alex replied. "She needs a hospital." The sound of his voice seemed to surprise them, as if they had expected a beast with only an animal's mentality. Bring her back this way," an officer with graying brown hair said. He motioned Alex forward. It took all of Alex's courage to obey. The girls huddled around him as if afraid to leave his side as he crossed between the police cars to the waiting ambulance. He felt the stares of the policemen and women follow him. Reaching the stretcher, Alex set the girl gently down. He stepped back and the medical team quickly took over. "We need to get out of here," an officer said. "Don't worry," Alex replied. "They won't be out, but they might need medical attention." "Let them rot," Amber said. The girls around her nodded. "Let's get you home," one of the officers directed. Sarah still stood next to Alex. "I feel safer with you," she said. Alex shook his head. "You'll be better off with them, trust me. Go home and call Tanner before he does something more stupid than looking for me. He's out of his mind with worry." Sarah gave Alex one last hug. "Thank you so much for coming after me," she said. "I'm glad I could help," he replied. He watched an officer lead her and another girl to the furthest car and help them inside. Alex turned to find the police officer, who had led the way to the ambulance. Studying him, the officer's name tag read Officer Dune. He had a close-trimmed beard and weary brown eyes. "I need you to come to the precinct for questioning," the officer said. Alex shook his head. "That's impossible." Someone raised a phone. He ducked away before they could take a picture and crossed back between the police cars. Nobody stopped him as he made his way past the gang's building and deeper into the SAA. Chapter 3. Alex waited in the shadows until the ambulance and police cars left. When the coast was clear, he made his way back to his motorcycle. He grabbed his helmet and sat on the curb. "Trent, you there?" "Alex, thank goodness. I thought they would try to take you in or something." Trent replied. "I didn't let them." "Did you, hurt anyone?" Trent asked. Alex fought down the offense he felt at the question. Trent was just worried. "A few of the gang members, but that's all." "Good," Trent replied with a breath of relief. I thought things were going to get awkward. They are, Alex replied dryly. Trent was silent for a moment, then said, You're still in rage mode, aren't you? Alex nodded, then remembered the werewolf couldn't see him. I can't get it to go away, and I don't know what to do. He didn't dare ride the motorcycle with his vision still touched in blue. He could barely control his thoughts with the anger that still flooded through him. Hold on a sec, Trent replied. A few moments later, Ciale said, Alex, are you all right? The sound of her voice calmed the frazzled edges of Alex's nerves. He took a deep breath. I'm fine. Don't lie, she said. He could hear the smile in her voice. You don't have to pretend to be strong for me. Isn't that what boyfriends are supposed to do? Alex asked, fighting back a smile of his own. The blue in his vision began to fade. Most boyfriends, Ciale replied. But you promised you would be honest with me no matter what, and I know you're not fine right now. Alex felt ashamed at her words. I'm sorry. I don't need to hear that, she said, her words gentle. I just want you to know that I care about you, the real you. You're busy saving people and improving the lives of humans and werewolves, but underneath it all, you're my Alex. You're strong but gentle, quick to act but able to think situations through, and most of all, you care about those around you. That's why you're in Grayton right now. You can't sit back when others could use your help. You're selfless, Alex. That's one of the things I love about you. Alex's muscles relaxed. His limbs reduced to their normal length. He felt his fangs and face return to normal, and fingers without claws held the helmet. Scratches showed where his claws had scored the paint. Thank you, Ciale, he said quietly. Feeling better now? Much, he told her. But you think way too much of me. She gave a light musical laugh. It was my turn to be honest. Alex shook his head, amazed at his good fortune to claim such an amazing girl's heart. Commotion rose from the building behind him. He could see faces peering through the windows of the structure across the street. Footsteps sounded down the alleys. I think I'm beginning to draw attention. I'd better go. He shoved the helmet on his head and climbed onto the motorcycle. He drove through the SAA with the feeling of hundreds of eyes watching him go. The tension eased when he reached the business section. Cars filled the streets, and pedestrians covered the sidewalks in droves. It was amazing how the dividing street of Angel Avenue had such a night and day difference. He took a calming breath. Ciale's voice was quiet when she spoke. Are you coming to Kalia's funeral? Tomorrow morning. The relief Alex had felt leaving the SAA fled. Sorrow clung to his thoughts with merciless weight. I can't. His voice broke on the words. You were her best friend here, Ciale said gently. It would mean a lot to her. Alex's gaze clouded to the point that he had to pull over. He slid his visor up and rubbed his eyes. I'm the reason she's dead. You tried to save her. You did everything you could. But it wasn't enough. Alex fought back the urge to cry. I can kill 100 extremists, but I can't save one girl? What's wrong with me? The tears he had tried to keep at bay broke free. You're a 17-year-old werewolf, she replied, her voice soft. You shouldn't have even been in that position. No one should have to watch their friend die. If I had morphed sooner. You can't blame yourself for something you can't control. Kalia wouldn't hold it against you. She kept calling my name. Alex hunched over on his motorcycle, the emotional pain so intense it made his chest throb. She knew you would do whatever you could to try to save her, and you battled through 100 armed guards to do it. You can't beat a bullet, Alex. He knew it was true, but he couldn't accept it. She wouldn't have been there in the first place if the general. He gritted his teeth and corrected himself. If my father hadn't been trying to make me into his killing machine. If I wasn't her friend, Kalia would be alive right now. Would you give that up? Ciale asked gently. Would you give away the friendship you shared to save her? Yes. Why? Ciale's question was filled with her need to understand. People walking down the street were giving Alex strange looks. He shut his visor, blocking them out. Because she was far better off before she met me. He started the motorcycle again. The sunlight on his shoulders felt flat and without warmth. He appreciated Ciale's silence as he drove down the road. He couldn't face more questions. He couldn't face anything at that moment. Alex's stomach growled. He found himself pulling into the small parking lot of the cafe where he had eaten with Cherish and the others the first time he had met them. He remembered to grab some bills from the cash Trent had given him, and made sure the seat was locked securely before he went into the cafe. He ate the egg, sausage, and cheese burrito without tasting it. The thoughts that swirled through his head did so with a maddening cadence that numbed his mind. I don't think we'll ever see her again. A sob followed the words. Alex turned his head slightly, catching sight of a woman bent over a table. The man next to her had a hand on her shoulder and wore the same broken expression. We can't give up. Desi is strong. You know that. So are they, James. Alex's first impulse was to clench away from the heartache in the woman's voice. He had been through enough sorrow. He couldn't handle feeling empathy for others when his ragged heart barely kept beating. I kept telling the police about the blue clover. They wrote it down, but they didn't act like it was important. The man's hand clenched into a fist. It's all we've got. That's why I kept saying it. It's the only thing that links us to her. Alex didn't know he had risen from the seat until he was almost to the couple. Was your daughter taken to the SAA? They looked up at him in surprise. Yes, the man said, his tone cautious. He leaned protectively closer to his wife. When? 2 days ago, the woman replied. She glanced at her husband. Are the police looking for her? Tears broke free to trickle down the woman's cheeks. Alex tried to be unmoved by her pain, to remain impartial behind the walls he had erected to avoid thinking of Cleo, but the hurt was too fresh, and he had to clench his jaw to keep his strong facade. They said they're trying, she answered. She buried her face against her husband's chest. He smoothed her brown hair with one hand. But they say too many are lost to the SAA. They go through in sweeps, but the girls being kept captive get moved. Alex nodded. The gang sign they left was a blue clover? Yes. They spray-painted it on the door to the gas station where Desi was working. She was the only one on that night, and security footage showed 2 men in hoodies grab her and drag her away. The man flinched as though the memory of watching his daughter be carried away by strangers had scarred his mind. Alex didn't know if they believed he would save their daughter, or if just the fact that someone cared was a lifeline to hold on to. He set a couple of bills down on their table. Don't give up hope. Desi will make it home. He didn't know what else to say. He turned to leave and heard the woman break into sobs as he exited the cafe. You're heading west, Trent said, his voice quiet as if he was afraid to speculate. I'm going to the funeral. The faint note of relief in Trent's voice was almost lost in the sound of the motorcycle engine. Do you want Jays to send the jet? No, Alex answered quietly. I'd prefer to keep this to myself. I'm not going to stay long. Are you coming back to the academy? Trent asked. The hopefulness in his voice ate at Alex's conscience. His friend truly missed him. I can't, Alex told him honestly. Not for a while at least. I need things to well? He let the thought die away. I understand. Have a safe trip. I'll keep an eye on you. I know you will. The fact that Trent was able to track his every move used to bother Alex to no end. Now, however, the thought that someone knew and cared about where he was on the long, lonely expanse of road filled him with a sort of comfort. He turned his gaze to the horizon, lost in the blue distance. Hills rolled away on either side, their graceful curves broken by cities, power lines, and small clusters of houses barely big enough to make up miniature towns. Alex let his thoughts go and became just a biker with the road beneath his tires. Chapter 4. It felt fitting that the rain fell during Cleo's funeral. Water ran off Alex's shoulders and through his hair as he studied the ground at his feet. Jay's calm, sad voice reverberated across the vast city cemetery. Alex stood in the older section where bowed angels, beseeching saints, and ornate cement crosses hid him from view of the dark-clothed, hunched shoulders and lowered heads of his classmates and Cleo's family. Alex couldn't make himself walk any closer. It was hard enough knowing that she was being lowered into the ground because of him. He couldn't face her family or friends. A footstep within the raindrops caught his ear. Alex looked up and met Ciale's understanding gaze. The tears Alex had been fighting to keep at bay broke free as Ciale made her way between the gravestones and wrapped her arms around his shoulders. He sobbed silently and felt her do the same. I'm so sorry, Alex, she said softly, her voice shaking. Me too, he replied. The rain fell harder, enveloping them in a thunder of sorrow louder than Alex's torrential thoughts. The pastor's voice was quiet as he intoned, "Cleo knows how much her loved ones care about her. She is safe now, far from the reaches of harm, and she'll watch over her loved ones and help you during difficult times. Take comfort in knowing that she is far beyond the reaches of pain or heartache, and that she will now and forever be surrounded by joy. Remember her in your days and live your lives so that you will be worthy to join her when your time here is through." They listened to the footsteps of the students and family members who slowly wandered away. Cleo's mom's soft sobs filled Alex with pain. He could hear Mr. Dixon's talking quietly to her as he led his wife back to the limousine. The sound of tires along the muddy ruts was dulled beneath the downpour. "Gather together," Jay's voice called softly when the last of the humans had departed. Alex's ears strained to pick up the chant he knew would follow. The voices of the students and professors spoke together. "Our sister body of flesh and blood no longer your soul holds. Run without the confines of blood and sinew, howl without the constriction of lungs or breath, and live within the embrace of the moon and her welcoming light. Your life is one with womankind, and your heart will beat with ours forevermore. You will not be forgotten." Low howls, soft but full, rose from the group around the grave. Alex knew if he stepped between the stones, he would see them huddled together in a close group, their heads bowed and hands held as they honored one of their fallen. Alex howled softly enough that they wouldn't hear him, but he felt the unity of his and Ciale's voices combining with theirs in one last farewell. When the voices faded away, Jay's concluded the chant. "Never forgotten, always one." Alex whispered the words along with the others. "I'm glad you came," Ciale told him. "Me too," Alex admitted. He held her close, resting his chin softly on the top of her head. He wanted to stay like that forever, to never let Ciale leave his side again, but he couldn't face the academy and the walls that reminded him of the girl who would never walk within them again. He took a shuddering breath. "I can't go back. Not yet, at least." Ciale was silent for a moment before she said, "I know." She gave him another tight hug and then released him. "I'd better get back to the others. I love you, Alex." "I love you, Ciale." He watched her disappear between the tombstones and out of the curtain of rain that blanketed him from the world. Alex lost track of how long he stood within the angels and crosses. He felt apart from them, but no less lost. By the time he made his way back to where he had hidden the motorcycle behind the far gate, the sun had set and the night was so deep part of him doubted it would ever rise again. The next night would be the full moon, but nothing penetrated the darkness of the storm clouds above. Alex pulled his key out of his soaked pocket and was about to climb onto the bike when he noticed the parcel that had been set on top of the fuel tank. Taking his time, Alex opened the plastic bags. Sandwiches, 2 apples, several bags of chips, and 2 candy bars were revealed. A note sat on top of them. Alex picked it up and squinted at Trent's scrawled handwriting. "I knew you wouldn't take the time to eat, so here. Don't worry. Tareth made. So it's not going to kill you." "Well, it might. There is a rain slicker. And several changes of your clothes in the saddlebags as well as some more money. You probably need to fill up pretty soon. You can thank me later." "Trent." Alex's stomach growled. He took a bite of the first sandwich. He paused and inspected the contents closer. It appeared to be peanut butter and Miracle Whip. Cook Gerald should definitely not let the girls in the kitchen. Alex was hungry enough to finish both sandwiches despite their strange contents, as well as one of the apples and a bag of chips before he turned to the saddlebags. The rain slicker was long and yellow. It looked like it belonged more on a Western cowboy than to a biker, but it would keep the rain off of him. Quick search revealed several changes of clothes along with a black hoodie. Alex pushed it to one side and paused when his fingers brushed something. He lifted the cloth and a small smile touched his mouth. A silver 7 had been embroidered on the sleeve of the black hoodie right over the 7 Alex had gotten tattooed on his shoulder to honor Jet. Alex shoved everything else back in the saddlebags but the hoodie and the rain slicker. He drew the hoodie on over his soaked clothes, then fastened the yellow slicker. Convinced that he looked like a terrifying motorcycle-riding banana, Alex kicked the bike into gear and cruised slowly back down the road. "Trent, you there?" he asked into his helmet's headset. "Always," Trent replied almost immediately. What do you do? Alex asked with a reluctant smile. Walk around with an earpiece in all day. Yes, and it would bring me a lot less stress if I could convince you to do the same. He paused then. Any luck? Not a chance, Alex replied with a snort. Trent chuckled. I had to try. I stuck an earpiece next to the tracking chip. In the gas cap. Don't worry. It's wrapped so it won't get ruined. I was worried, Alex replied dryly. I knew you would be, Trent answered. Tell Tara thank you for the sandwiches. He could hear his friend's smile when he said, You must not have eaten them. Or you wouldn't be thanking her. Alex laughed out loud. They were pretty horrible. I wonder if I could talk Professor Colleen into teaching a cooking class next year. The whole point of this academy is to teach us survival. It'd be useless if we all die of food poisoning as soon as we graduate. You have a point. Peanut butter and Miracle Whip. I know, right? Trent said. But get this. Brock got his hands on one and now she can't make them fast enough. It's amazing he's still alive. That human could out-eat a bear. Gladly, a voice called in the background. Are you in the wolf den? Alex asked, surprised. Unfortunately, Trent muttered. A dull sound came through as though he kicked something. It's pretty filthy. Only because I practically live down here, Brock called. It's not like I have to impress any girls. Like you know any girls, Trent replied. I know plenty of girls, Brock shot back. Or I would if I didn't spend all my time down here. What are you guys doing? Trent hesitated at Alex's question. His voice was a bit reluctant when he replied. Looking for Drogon. Alex's heart clenched. Even the sound of his half-brother's name was enough to make him see red. The thought of Drogon safe and warm while Cleo lay beneath the rain-soaked ground was almost more than Alex could bear. Jace is concerned Drogon will be out to avenge his father. Mouse has triple fortified the academy, but there are safe houses in small werewolf communities we're trying to watch over. Jace is also trying to track down a werewolf killing humans in Texas. It really never stops on this end. Trent fell quiet then said, Drogon really could be anywhere. Just keep Cassie safe for me. I will, Trent promised. And thanks for the clothes. He heard the smile in Trent's voice when his friend replied. No problem. Chapter 5. Sarah's parents were waiting in the small apartment living room when Sarah led the way inside. Mom, Dad, this is Alex, she introduced. Everyone stepped to the side so that Alex could pass by. He felt suddenly very out of place amid the cozy furnishings and welcoming sense of the apartment. Sarah's mom crossed to Alex and hugged him without hesitation. Thank you so much, she said with tears streaming down her face. Alex's gaze shifted to Sarah's dad. Thank you for helping our baby come home, he said, his voice thick with emotion. He held out a hand. Sarah's mom stepped back and Alex shook Mr. Buchanan's hand. You are welcome here any time. A knock sounded on the door. Everyone froze for a moment. I can go out a window, Alex offered. Nonsense, Mrs. Buchanan said, her voice soft. Sarah, Tanner, why don't you guys take Alex into the back room? Alex followed them down the small hallway. Sarah and Tanner crossed to a couch, while Josh and Jen pretended to look through a stack of movies on a bookshelf. It was obvious everyone's attention was on whoever was at the front door. Mr. Buchanan? A deep voice asked. Alex heard an answering sound of surprise. Good afternoon, officer. Alex's heart clenched and he heard a small gasp escape from Sarah. Mr. Buchanan, we have been notified that you are harboring a werewolf on your premises. A werewolf? Mr. Buchanan repeated. Why would there be a werewolf here? If there is a werewolf in your residence, you can be charged for sheltering a fugitive, the officer continued. Alex crossed to the window. He pushed it open soundlessly. Alex, I'm so sorry, Sarah whispered. It's okay, Alex replied, forcing a smile. I know the risk you took bringing me here. We wouldn't do anything that would bring danger to our family, Mr. Buchanan was saying from the front room. Then you won't mind if I search your apartment? The officer asked. Mr. Buchanan was left with no choice. Alex climbed out the window and levered himself onto the roof. He slid the window shut just as the voices reached the back room. I'm sorry to disturb you, the officer said, but I need to check everyone's identification cards. Alex listened to the shuffle as the students pulled out their school cards or driver's licenses. After a moment the officer spoke again. Everything checks out. I apologize for the inconvenience, and I will leave you to your evening. Alex listened to his footsteps cross back to the door, then it shut. Come back in, Alex. We're so sorry. The doorbell rang as Alex's foot touched the window sill. He paused. I'll go see who it is, Mrs. Buchanan said. When the door opened, a teary voice spoke. Is he here? Is the werewolf who saved your daughter here? Alex pulled his foot back up and crouched above the window, listening intently. If they were trying to flush him out, he was determined not to do anything that would bring Sarah's family under possible condemnation. No, he's not, Mrs. Buchanan said. It meant something to Alex that she didn't deny the fact that a werewolf had saved her daughter. The woman at the door broke down. Do you know how I can find him? I need him to save my Abby. She never came home. We waited and she just didn't come. No, they've got her. They left a sign. Come sit down, Mrs. Buchanan offered. Alex followed their footsteps in his mind. He heard the woman take a seat at the edge of the Buchanan's couch. Tell me what happened, Millie. Alex settled on his back on the cold, rough roof. A shiver ran beneath his skin as he listened to the woman tell about coming home to find her daughter missing. The pull of the moon was getting stronger. Alex couldn't stop thinking of girls locked in makeshift prisons within the SAA, prey to any of the merciless desires of the gangs that held them hostage. A harder shiver shook his body, cold warred with the need to phase. Alex wouldn't be able to deny it much longer. He sat up and glanced at the horizon. The last of the daylight was almost gone. He could feel as much as see the glow of moonlight peering from between the buildings. He was out of time. Alex rolled from the roof, caught a drain pipe and worked hand over hand to the ground. He shoved his clothes into a gap behind the building just before the moonlight caught him. Dark gray fur, darker than he remembered it being, ran up his arms and down his shoulders. The tension fled from his muscles as his tumultuous thoughts were replaced with purpose and drive. His pain at losing Cleo remained, but instead of being numbing and consuming, it drove him to protect those he could. Alex loped through the streets and traveled deep into the SAA as the moon rose. Above the buildings, catching in broken windows, stagnant puddles of water, and shattered glass lying along the dirty cement. He followed his nose through the unlit streets, using the sense of fear and anger, frustration and greed to guide him. What is that? Someone asked from a doorway. Alex stopped on the sidewalk in front of them, studying the pair. A blue clover had been painted on the door. Someone had crafted it with skill, outlining the leaves and giving enough detail to make the graffiti look like it was coming out of the wood. It's a dog, another man replied. Dogs aren't that big, the first pointed out. They carried knives, but Alex wasn't afraid of blades. He bared his teeth and a low growl rumbled from his throat. I think it's going to attack, the first said, scrambling for the doorknob. Alex took a step forward. The second man pounded on the door. Let us in, he cried. The door opened and the pair rushed inside. Alex lowered his head as he ran. He dove into the door just before it closed. The force of his body slammed the door open, flinging both men backwards. The man who had opened the door for them stood staring at Alex like he was a demon. Alex loped past him, following his nose down the corridor of the building. Yelling erupted behind him. Alex ignored the commotion as he ran down the hall. The floors of the building rose up and down in a spiral with a wide, vast space in the middle. A dead elevator sat open near the lobby. Alex could tell when he passed that it hadn't moved in years. Alex paused by a set of stairs, wondering which way was the logical direction to find the girls. Shouts and the sounds of doors slamming echoed down. With it came the faintest whiff of feminine scent. It was tangled with fear and pain and shut off quickly, but was enough to give Alex his heading. Stop him, a voice yelled. Alex lowered his head and charged up the sloping path. A gunshot sounded. Alex dodged to the right, then ducked under the shooter and shoved him over the rail. The yell of the man falling gave rise to shouts of surprise from those below. Alex grabbed the next man with his fangs by the arm, rolled and used his weight to throw the man into the next two. A woman with a bandana around her forehead blocked his path above them. Leave, devil, she spat. She passed a switchblade from hand to hand with a speed that told Alex she knew how to use it. He wondered what she thought of the gang's kidnapping of young women. He lifted his lips in a snarl. The woman backed up a step in surprise at the vehemence in Alex's eyes. Diablo, she cursed him. They'll kill you. Alex gathered his legs and leaped. She swiped at his chest. The blade cut shallowly through his skin as he knocked her heavily to the ground. He hit the ground running without looking back. He was almost to the next landing when the scent caught his nose. Spinning. Alex ran straight to the door. He ducked his head and hit it so hard the wood splintered inward with a sharp crack. What the? Screams of fear touched the air. The sight of girls cowering on mattresses, with their ankles chained to the walls, sent Alex into a rage. He grabbed the closest guard in his jaws and pulled him down, using his body to leap at the next. The man stumbled backwards and yelled when Alex's fangs tore into his arm. Something slammed into Alex's side. He turned so fast he grabbed the bat before his attacker could pull it back. Alex bit down, snapping the bat in two. The man looked around for another weapon, but Alex was on him before he could defend himself. He wanted to tear the man's throat out. The scent of fear, pain, and the salty tang of tears let Alex know what happened in that room. The girls didn't deserve it. No one deserved to be chained to a wall and treated like a possession to be used and thrown away. He gave another guttural growl. The man froze at the feeling of Alex's fangs on the bare skin of his neck. Alex could hear the commotion of men hurrying to reach the room. He didn't have much time to free the girls and get them to safety. Alex snarled loud enough to let the man know that his life would be forfeit if he moved so much as a muscle. He let the man go and paced to the nearest mattress. The girl cowered against the wall. The handcuff around her ankle had rubbed her skin raw. The other end was fastened to a thick eye bolt screwed into the bricks. Alex bit the handcuff closest to the wall. The girl screamed in terror as if she thought he was trying to kill her. When he stepped back, she stared at the broken handcuff. Alex left her and hurried to the next girl. She made a little squeak of fear as his massive head bit down near her ankle. The scent of the blood that stained her mattress made his stomach roll. The girls shouldn't have gone through such things. He bit back a roar of rage and loped to the next bed. He broke the next 3 handcuffs with his fangs before the door flew open. Back away from the girls, a man shouted. Alex's paws hit the ground twice, and then he was at the man's throat. The force of his body slamming into the man barreled them both through the door. Knives, fists, and clubs rained down, but Alex barely felt them. He tore through an arm and snapped a man's leg. The cry of pain that answered was covered by Alex's roar of rage. He could smell the scents of the men who had been in to see the girls. He tore into them, whirring them like rag dolls. Blood coated his muzzle and slicked the floor. As more attackers poured up the stairs, more bodies lay mangled at his feet. They whimpered and cowered away from him, holding broken arms and torn torsos. He wanted to ensure that they would never hurt anyone ever again. Eventually they stopped attacking. Alex fought to catch his breath. His dark gray fur was slicked black with blood. Alex limped to the next bed. The girl didn't make a sound as Alex bit carefully through the chains. They kept watching the doorway as if fearing more members of the gang would appear and imprison them again, but though Alex's senses strained, he didn't hear anyone rushing to oppose him. When he made his way to the door, those he had fought cowered away from him and let the girls pass behind him unstopped. A hand touched Alex's shoulder, then another. The girls walked with their fingers entwined in his fur as if they needed the reassurance. Alex let their trust calm his pounding heart. They knew he was a werewolf and they knew he fought to free them. It was enough to chase away his rage and let him lead them to safety. When they reached the street, one of the girls held out a cell phone. It was covered in blood, no doubt taken from a gang member still left below. She dialed a number with shaking fingers. Alex could hear the other end of the conversation. Hello. Mom, she said, her eyes filling with tears. Desi? Oh my goodness, Desi. Bill, it's Desi. Alex heard the familiar voice cry on the other end. Desi closed the phone after a few minutes. They're coming to get us, she told the other girls. And they're bringing the police. Her voice wavered. We're going home. Tears shone in the moonlight as they held each other. Alex stood apart from the group, watching them, protecting them. The fact that the girls came from one gang hideout and were the victims of a single gang's kidnapping wasn't lost on him. He wondered how many more suffered from abuse and fear, unable to return to their families. Police sirens sounded in the distance. The fact that they were entering the SAA again filled Alex with determination. He would help them rid the SAA and Grayton of the scourge that plagued it. No one should have to live in fear. He had done so long enough to know that it wasn't truly living. As soon as the police cars pulled up, Alex slipped back to the doorway to ensure that the members of the Blue Clover gang wouldn't interfere with the rescue. His heart warmed when the man and woman from the diner rushed from one of the vehicles and wrapped Desi up in loving arms. The rest of the girls were bundled in blankets and helped into the back seats. Do I need to send an ambulance or get body bags? Alex was surprised to realize the officer was addressing him. He recognized Officer Dune's graying brown hair and close-trimmed beard. The officer regarded him warily. As much as Alex hated the thought of the gang members receiving care after what they had done to the girls, he couldn't deny that a few of them would need medical attention if they were going to survive the night. Alex ducked inside. A few seconds later, the sound of footsteps followed. He led the way back up the ramps toward the coppery scent of blood. Keep him away from us, a gang member cried, holding his mangled arm. What a mess, an officer behind him said. Officer Dune surveyed the mattresses and handcuffs. He looked back at Alex and met his gaze. Can't say I blame you. His eyes narrowed and he studied the beaten men and women. I have a daughter of my own. He put a hand to the radio near his shoulder. 1141. Requesting 2 ambulances. Dispatched to 78 and Madison. The voice on the other end confirmed his request. Alex padded back outside and was surprised when the officer followed. We've sent task forces here before. They moved the girls. Officer Dune clenched his hands before shoving them in his pockets. I hate to think of more girls stuck here in the SAA. A cold shiver ran through Alex's body. He could feel the small aches of the blades and clubs that had struck home. But the night was young and the pull of the moon was strong. He wasn't done. Alex lifted his muzzle to the sky. A long, low, threatening howl rolled from his chest and echoed down the streets. It was a warning to those who dared to hurt defenseless citizens. The demon of Grayton was coming. Chapter 6. The officers followed Alex down the next hall. The building was older and smelled of mildew. After barreling down the door, the only obstacles Alex had encountered were 2 armed gang members at the stairs. Officer Dune had dispatched them before their bullets struck home. Alex stalked slowly to the end of the hallway. He could hear the stilted breaths of individuals waiting beyond. If they were armed, the officers could get shot. Alex wasn't about to let that happen. He threw a glance back at the men who followed him. Officer Dune held up a hand, motioning his companions to halt. Alex took a few more steps forward before giving a sharp snarl that tore through the hallway. Silence answered. Alex heard the slide of metal from leather as an officer pulled his secondary weapon. Alex's muscles tightened. He was prepared to do things the hard way. We give up, a voice called. Alex paused. He glanced back at Officer Dune. The officer gave a small shrug, his attention on the end of the hall. You give up? Yeah, the man said. We heard what happened to Blue Clover. You can have the girls. Someone has to answer for their kidnapping, one of the officers whispered. We'll worry about that when the girls are safe, Officer Dune replied. A few minutes later, Alex found himself following the police officers and girls back up the musty hallway. He kept checking over his shoulder, but the gang members had remained true to their word and let them leave without confrontation. The girls were escorted to the new batch of waiting police cars. Alex turned away as soon as the last door shut. Really? Officer Dune asked. Another one? Alex left him to follow if he wished. He wasn't surprised to hear the officer's footsteps. Soon they reached a parking garage with a red 55 spray-painted on the front 2 pillars. We might want to leave this one for another night, Officer Dune suggested. At Alex's look, he let out a slight breath. Let's just say the Fivers are known for 2 things: guns and their aversion to authority. Cruz takes any encroachment to his territory personally. The thought of confronting another gang who would fight back matched the restlessness that pulsed through Alex's veins. He couldn't stop. He couldn't let memories of Cleo and the graveyard shrouded in rain overpower him. He had to fight, to push it away, and he would free others in her name. He had failed her. He couldn't fail them. He couldn't stop. "Wait," Officer Dune called. But Alex was already loping down into the dark parking garage. He could smell girls' fear and pain underlying the scents of iron, drugs, and the sickly, sweet odor of unwashed bodies. "I can't believe I'm following a werewolf on the night of a full moon into the Fivers' hideout," Officer Dune muttered when Alex slowed for him to catch up. Alex threw him a look. "You've got to admit this isn't normal," the officer said. "It's not normal," the other officer who had come with them echoed as he hurried to catch up. The name on his uniform read Officer Smith. "You don't have to come down here," Officer Dune told him. "Like I'd let you go alone." "I'm not alone." Officer Dune pointed at Alex. "I've got him." "And that's supposed to be reassuring?" Officer Smith asked dryly. "He hasn't failed us yet." Alex led the way down the cement ramp. "Ever stop to wonder why a werewolf is so crazed about freeing girls from the SAA?" Officer Smith asked quietly as they followed Alex. "I'm just glad someone is getting them out," Officer Dune replied. "How many times have we tried to storm the SA only to have red tape get in the way, or we find the girls moved? It's about time something actually works. They could have our badges for going down here without orders." "That's a risk I'm willing to take," Officer Dune replied, his voice quiet. "If Jamie was down here, I'd be grateful someone dared to take a stand." The officers fell silent as they followed Alex deeper into the parking garage. A small flashing light caught Alex's attention. The small movement of a camera came from the corner. The gang knew they were there. The sound of a foot on cement was loud within the confines of the garage. "Look out!" Officer Smith yelled. Light flashed and the officers dove behind two cement pillars. Gunshots echoed as they returned fire. Other footsteps thundered down from above. They were trapped between two groups. A glance showed the officers effectively pinned behind the pillars. A growl rumbled from Alex's throat. He wasn't about to let the officers be killed because of his foolish stubbornness. "Wait!" Officer Dune yelled. Alex dove between gunshots, crossing the dimly lit ground to the waiting gang. Faster than they could react, he leaped past and grabbed one man's gun hand in his jaws as he did so. The man yelled as he was thrown bodily into two of his comrades. Alex bowled down two more and jumped back before two bullets buried into the ground where he had stood. Alex gathered his legs beneath him and leaped. He hit the first man straight on, slamming him to the ground with the force of his rage. He grabbed the second man's arm in his jaw and ground down, forcing him to his knees as he writhed in pain. "Let me go! Let me go!" the man screamed. Alex jerked his head to the right, snapping the man's gun arm. His cry of agony echoed through the parking garage. "What's going on?" a gang member from the group on the level above demanded. "There's a monster," one of the men yelled. "It's the demon," another shouted. "Then kill it," the man above commanded. The order seemed to give the gang members courage. Guns were pointed and knives raised. Alex bared his teeth in a snarl. He knew he was about to feel some serious pain. A gunshot rang out and one of the men dropped his gun with a shout. Another bullet sunk into his leg. The man next to him swore and grabbed his arm. Alex used the distraction to attack. He jumped on the back of the man holding his leg and leaped off him to the throat of another man who was trying to shoot at the officers. The man fell back with Alex on top of him. Alex's fangs inched toward the jugular where the man's lifeblood flowed millimeters from the surface. The man strained, fighting to push him off, but he couldn't move the werewolf. Alex thought of the girls he knew they would find. Their pain, their fear, the cruelty that had been done to them that they didn't deserve. He had no doubt the man had been involved in hurting them. He could smell the girls on him. Alex's jaws ached to close. He could end the man's life and stop his reign of terror forever. Something slammed into the back of Alex's head. His jaws opened and he rolled to the right, struggling to regain his senses. The bar hit him again and again, bruising his shoulders and ribs. Alex wondered where the officers were. A bullet would stop the attack and give him the second he needed to regroup. Alex pushed up and his heart skipped a beat. Officer Dune and Officer Smith knelt on the cement with their hands up. 4 members of the Fivers gang stood around them with guns trained on their heads. "That's right, demon," the one who had shouted the commands growled. His eyes narrowed and he gave a gold-capped smile. "See what messing with the Fivers will get you? 2 slugs between the eyes." He pointed his gun at Officer Dune. Don't do it, Cruz, the officer said. We just want to free the girls. You and what army? Cruz asked. His eyes narrowed. I have a feeling nobody's going to come here searching for your bodies. His finger tightened on the trigger. Rage surged through Alex. He barely felt the crowbar that slammed against his shoulders again. He tore the crowbar from the man's grasp with his jaws. The second his paws hit the ground, Alex leaped at the gang leader using his full power. Cruz's eyes widened before Alex slammed into him, driving him into the cement pillar. A gun went off. Alex spun, his heart skipping beats in his panic. Officer Dune was pulling Officer Smith back, using the pillar to shield them from the gang members. Officer Smith held his leg. Blood dripped to the ground from a bullet hole in his calf. They'll die because of you, Cruz growled. Alex grabbed the man's throat in his jaws. He felt the leader stiffen with fear. Alex growled, a low vibrating sound that echoed like thunder through the garage. I'll let them go, Cruz forced out. I'll shoot the demon, a man said, pressing the muzzle of a gun against Alex's head. Alex met Officer Dune's gaze, keeping his jaws locked around Cruz's neck. Alex's heart thundered in his chest, skipping every other beat. He had to force his legs to hold as the gun barrel pressed harder. Officer Dune shook his head. If you shook him, he'll kill Cruz. He'd be dead, the man spat. Don't do it, Officer Smith replied. His body will spasm. He'll tear out Cruz's throat so fast he'll bleed to death before he hits the ground. Let them leave, Cruz said tightly. Not without the girls, Officer Dune said. You seriously want to press your luck right now? The one with the gun pressed to Alex's head asked. Back up, Cruz told his man. Alex felt a breath of relief when the man obeyed. He wondered if he would feel the impression of the gun against his skull for the rest of his life. Let me go, Cruz said. Alex knew better than to trust the gang leader. He gave another growl and bit down. He felt Cruz wince as his fangs pierced the sensitive skin of his throat. Put your guns down, Cruz yelled. His men hurried to obey. As soon as the last gun was set on the pile, Alex let up slowly. Cruz moved to push up, but Alex grabbed him again hard enough to send a warning. All right, Cruz said with a touch of panic in his voice. Just go. Alex fell back, taking care to face the gang members. The fivers didn't move. As he reached Officer Smith's side, he lowered his head and the officer put his arm around Alex's shoulders. Alex backed up slowly, helping the officer to his feet. Officer Dune ducked under the officer's other arm. Together they helped him back up the ramp. The second they reached fresh air and the touch of moonlight, Officer Dune radioed for backup. Alex paced. He knew it was his fault Officer Smith had gotten shot. Neither officer would have gone below if it wasn't for his actions. They're on their way, Officer Dune said. He kept pressure on Officer Smith's leg to slow the bleeding. Alex couldn't risk them following him back in. He knew Officer Dune wouldn't leave his partner. Don't even think about it, Officer Dune said, catching Alex studying the parking garage. You're in no shape to go back in there either. Alex could feel the bruises and cuts from the knives and crowbar. His head ached and his heart already skipped every couple of beats. He fought back it. Shiver as the icy cold of the night cut through his fur. Officer Dune was right. It would be a bad idea to enter the parking garage again. Maybe doing something so stupid would catch the fivers off guard and give him the element of surprise. Alex stalked back into the tunnel. Get back here, Officer Dune yelled. He's insane, Officer Smith said. Alex couldn't help but agree as he entered the tunnel that smelled of gunpowder and blood. He kept to the darkest part, a shadow amid the shadows, his gray coat blending in perfectly with the darkness. He would have killed you, a voice argued. How did they get so far? We were ready. Juarez's guys held up the front like you said. It was that demon wolf we weren't ready for. We need to move the girls. Alex's lips pulled back in a silent snarl at the sound of Cruz's voice. Get them to the Black Aces before the cops come back sniffing around. Alex stalked closer. He passed the place where they had fought and followed. The voices left down a smaller tunnel. Rico and Tony need to go to a hospital, a woman said. Can't Chaser fix them up? Cruz asked. Not with Rico's arm half torn off, and Tony won't be firing a gun anytime soon, she answered. Not like he could hit anything anyway, Cruz replied. Have Oscar take them. Vic, you're in charge of the girls. Good, Vic replied. The fur on the back of Alex's neck rose at the obvious expectation in the man's voice. Get them to the Black Aces first, Cruz replied with a sigh of exasperation. Animals, he concluded with a mutter.